We talked just a bit last night about the powerful reality of what your father introduced in his book, Right from Wrong. This whole concept of moral relativism and relativism today. And it seems like that is our biggest problem that the Christians face is how do you speak to relativistic thinking in that there is no truth except what each person believes is truth. And so how do we, I feel like we don't want to be just asking questions alone, but really being prepared to give an answer for the hope that is in us. And so how do you, yeah, okay, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you for that. So my dad wrote a book called Right from Wrong around 25 years ago or so, and argued that our culture is deeply relativistic. You have your moral truth and I have mine. I think culture's kind of shifted from then. It's not kind of a live to each his own culture anymore. It's if you don't agree with this, we're gonna shame you and call you out and tell you you're immoral and harmful and hurtful. At least a significant amount of voices will address issues that way, which tells me no one is really a relativist, and no one ever was a relativist. Now, people are told that each have their own moral truth, because this is sometimes the cultural waters we swim in, so to speak. But everybody's made in the image of God and lives in the world in which God created. And part of being human is we have a moral conscience, Romans 2. So think about like a beach ball. If you take a beach ball and you push it underwater, what's gonna happen? You guys are like, we don't have beach balls here in Minnesota. I'm kidding. What's a beach ball? If you push it underwater, it pops up, right? It takes a lot of force to hold it down because the nature of gravity and air, laws of physics. Bobbers, there you go, fair enough. You have bobbers. It takes a lot of force to push it underwater. Left to itself, it's gonna pop up. Whenever somebody says they're a moral relativist, I never believe them. They think they are, but I'm gonna look for the beach ball to pop up. And there's only a matter of time before it will. I'll give you two examples. I was having a debate on stage with an atheist, I think it's 2018, 2019. And his whole focus is to point out things that he thinks is immoral that Christians do. And I said, wait a minute, where do you get objective right and wrong from? And his answer was kind of, he didn't think there's objective right and wrong. And I said, your whole focus is to point out, is to show that Christians are wrong. He goes, well, I'm just pointing out hypocrisy. And I said, because you think hypocrisy is morally wrong. You can't escape it. If we should point out hypocrisy and say it's bad, that's because we think it's morally wrong, which cries out for where we get moral duties and values from if there is no God. Maybe 15 years ago plus, I had a debate, you would love this, Jason, at our high school. I had some high school students when I was teaching full-time come to me at our Christian school. And they said, we went to this free-thinking atheist event at the public school in town, and 100 students showed up. What should we do? Well, we came up with the idea that we would host a debate at our church between 3 of their students, agnostic, atheist, skeptical students, and 3 of mine. And we hosted it. And it was on intelligent design, the historical Jesus, and morality. And one of my students got up there and she said, look, we all know there's right and wrong. We expect people to follow it. There's a moral law, and the best explanation is a moral lawgiver. She sat down. One of their students said, there is no moral law. There's no objective right and wrong. It's all subjective like ice cream or something to that effect. And then he sits down. And then it was time for the closing speech. And the same student who just said morality is like ice cream got up behind a podium, noticing he was in a church with a mostly Christian audience. He said, you know what? You guys are bigots, you're hateful, you're homophobic, shame on you. Do you notice anything odd? Now, I couldn't because I was like hosting it and I was the MC. But if I was one of the students, I would have walked up there and I would have said something effective. I want to thank my opponent for conceding the entire debate and admitting that there's a God. Because in the earlier speech, he said morality is all subjective. But then he just morally condemned all of you for being immoral, which only makes sense if there's a moral law, hence a God, dropped the mic, thank you, and walked off. That is the beach ball seeping its way up. I had a debate, if you remember Tony Campolo with his son, Bart Campolo is a friend of mine, and he argues that morality is subjective. And I was like, I'm not going to waste time. What about the Holocaust? And he obviously backtracked. Nobody wants to say that's okay. Friends, people know there's right and there's wrong. So whenever somebody tells me this, I think they believe it. I'm not saying they're lying, but they don't really believe it. I mean, look, you want to take a personal example to them and just show it to their face. So if somebody's like, thinks Trump is just evil, and the point is not politics here, but if somebody holds that view, I'm going to say, if I understand you correctly, then you have no basis for judging anything he said or done as being wrong. This is just your subjective flavor, like whether I should have cream in my coffee or not. And most people, if they feel that way, aren't going to want to just say, oh yeah, I just don't like him, but he's fine. That's probably not where they're going to want to go. So find some, by the way, here's another example. Look, right now there's a potential peace plan that's being laid out between Hamas and between Israel. I have strong views about this, but I'm making a different point. One side says Israel is committing genocide in Palestine. The other side says Hamas is trying to commit genocide against Israel. There is no side that says, you know what, genocide is cool. I think you should be able to just wipe people out whenever you want to. It's all like ice cream. Both sides assume that there's an objective moral standard we ought to follow. They differ over who's guilty. They differ over the facts. But they both assume there's an objective moral standard. I want to know where that comes from, which tells me everybody knows there's right and wrong. No one is really a relativist.